Hi, I'm Jason Bradford.
I'm Shart Miller.
And I'm Rob Dietz. Welcome to Crazy Town, where Mad Max looks like a documentary. This episode was originally recorded on December 18th, 2019, before we knew much about the coronavirus outbreak. Rather than adding new material here, we decided that we'll release a full episode soon about the effects of the virus on communities, the economy, and the environment. So please stay tuned.
Hey guys, I could use some help dealing with some emotions that are creeping up. It's kind of complex. Are you ready to work with me here?
Yeah, you can cry on my shoulder anytime you want, Jason.
What are emotions?
Well, yeah, exactly. So, it's hard because you hear something about the world and it just sometimes it just like hits you and it shocks you and you're like, I have this sort of sense of like nostalgia and loss and also awe and disgust and well, I just tell you what happened.
Yeah, you forgot snark. That's my favorite emotion.
I'm counting on you to bring out here, okay?
Okay.
So this professional colleague of my wife has this daughter, and she's got some
Wait, that's confusing. This colleague of a person who was your wife?
No, she's my wife right now.
Daughter?
No, okay. So
someone you know.
I know her a little bit, but she works with my wife, and her daughter, not my wife's daughter. I don't have a daughter. Jesus. Okay. So this young lady, she's like 12 or 13, and my wife finds out that
your wife's colleague is 12 or 13?
No, her daughter.
Okay.
But my wife's colleague and her daughter and her husband and sometimes her other kids go to like Arizona or Southern California like almost every weekend and like for the winter because she's got softball chops and they're thinking, she's in like...
What are softball chops?
In other words, she's really good at this sport called softball.
Okay.
And they're thinking she could go to college and get a scholarship. And because
so they're going to Arizona every weekend?
Yes, or Southern California. There's these tournaments, so you can sign up. I looked this up. You can sign up. You live in Oregon, or you can. There's these leagues. They're called travel leagues. These elite travel leagues, and you can sign up. And they're usually age bracketed. So if you're 12 years old, you can sign up for this Oregon Travel League team. But their expectation is that you and probably your family, because you're like preteen maybe, are going to travel, get on an airplane every damn weekend so your family can watch you play like 3 softball games.
So it's like my son is in a travel league for soccer, but that's basically just this area, Willamette Valley. He might go up to Portland or something like that.
Right.
This is that on steroids.
Yes, and so
instead of in a car, you're getting on an airplane.
Yes, and so I think back to my own youth where I had played Little League, whatever, and wrestled, and yeah, it would all be in that area, and you'd play kids you knew from school, but now you're playing kids from like Indiana and Florida and New York.
So they're all flying in. From all over Arizona or Southern California.
Yes, and this is a thing apparently, and so. It's hard now to become an athlete that does multiple sports. It's like everyone's specializing, and then there's expecting you to fly everywhere, and your family's spending thousands and thousands of dollars.
It's only for the financially privileged.
Yes, you have to be financially privileged to begin with, but then it's sold as like, we'll get your kid a scholarship maybe if they're good, but of course... What are the odds, and why don't you save college money for college? But it's this new cultural thing that just whacked me that I didn't even know was going on.
If you think about it, too, if your kid's good at sports and you're the dad and you don't have them traveling and doing this, then you're just a big jerk.
I know. It's this conundrum.
Or you're a jerk anyway.
Right. I mean, well, in our case, sure.
But we're burning these precious hydrocarbons so hopefully our kids can get a higher education, right? And it's just the extreme travel of our culture is what hit me and how different it is now from when I was a kid.
Well, yeah, I mean that is different, and it's pretty crazy. But step back and look at professional sports, right? Like think about the travel associated with that. You know, like the teams flying everywhere. I was thinking about that. You look at the playoffs in all these sports, and to make it fair. They go back and forth constantly.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so they're not going to do, if it's a 7-game series, they're not going to do 4 games in a chunk at the home, the team that with advantage, and then 3 games. No, they'll go back and forth and back and forth, That's just a small example of that. And of course, fans travel.
Oh yeah.
To go see their teams, like San Diego, the football team. There are no San Diego Charger fans.
That is not a football team anymore.
Well, it was, right?
Yeah.
And they basically only have travel fans who come in to watch their team play. So like Pittsburgh Steeler fans or whatever will come in to watch those games.
Yeah.
The most crazy example I just realized was, or just that I thought was ironic, was, a lot of airlines actually sponsor teams.
Yes.
Like Real Madrid, which is this huge soccer team. They were having
Madrid, Spain.
Yes, thank you.
We're Americans. We have to really put it
not
in
Madrid, Ohio.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Madrid, Spain, right? And happened to be that the 25th COP meeting, the big climate meeting, was being held in Spain.
Okay, in
right?
Madrid.
Yeah, at the same time. So the Real Madrid team decided they were going to show their support by changing their team colors. They were wearing green jerseys.
Oh, so thank them.
A climate friendly soccer team.
Right.
Yeah.
Solidarity. The irony is their sponsor is Emirates Airlines, right? So they've got Fly Emirates, on their greenwashed, jerseys in solidarity with COP25.
I just want to cry, you see?
Well, it's common. I mean, I have to admit I'm a Portland Timbers fan, and I searched far and wide for a nice green Timbers jersey that I could wear that didn't have the sponsor, which of course is Alaska Airlines.
Right.
And if you go on their website, right, and you say, okay, I want to get tickets to a Timbers game, the home games are highlighted, but then they Alaska Airlines is the away game. So if you click on that, I think I haven't clicked on one, but it'll take you to the Alaska Airlines website and get you a ticket. Yeah, nice. Make it really easy.
And they'll let people who wear Timber shirts board on the plane early.
Oh, nice. Of course, who wants to get on the plane early? Like. I really want my flight to be longer.
People who want to shove their huge oversized bag in the overhead compartment.
Filled with Alaska Airlines T-shirts. Yeah.
But guys, of course, sports is just one easy example of this crazy extreme travel culture we live in, right? And I started digging into the travel and tourism industry. I had how big is this now, right? How important is this? And according to the World Travel and Tourism Council, global travel and tourism industry is now over 10% of global GDP and 10% of jobs worldwide.
So basically a tenth of the economy.
The global economy.
Tourism and travel.
In travel. So it could be business travel or, not just tourism, but the whole industry, writ large is now 10% of jobs and income.
And most of that has got to be airline travel, right?
Yeah, airlines are huge, of course. It gets you places that you never could have gotten to before in a timely manner. It's incredible. So this growth in travel is now 3.9% a year. So that means it expects to double in 18 years, right?
Yeah, let's harken back to that. We talked a lot about growth in our first season, and there's this great rule of thumb. Like if you know the percentage at which something's growing, in this case 3.9%, you take that 3.9 and divide it into 70, and that gives you how many years till doubling time.
Yeah.
And so what did you say the doubling time
18
on this?
18 years.
So in 18 years, we'll have twice as many business travelers in their million-mile club and hanging out in the penthouse of the Hilton downtown.
Yeah, and so for example, there's about 23,000 commercial airplanes. So, 737s or whatever, 747s.
No, I don't like to fly commercial. I like to take my own private jet.
Private jets. Yeah, whatever. You add these all, but they're supposed to double, right? And so now in 18 or 20 years, it's going to be like 46,000. Just incredible, the doubling.
Well, and you're right. You could see tourism in particular growing, international tourism growing. Here I am, Mr. Hypocrite, very much part of this.
Yes.
Last summer, my family went abroad. We went to Turkey, amongst a couple other places.
That's in Eurasia, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to keep talking to him anymore? I mean, that's disgusting.
I know. It is awful.
All right, well, let's just see where this goes.
I'll give you lots of excuses for why we went. Right. But we went to Turkey, and we went to an area called Cappadocia, which is sort of in the middle of the country. It's this incredible these incredible geological formations where they have these hollowed out spires and canyons, and people who live there created these caves, these underground
like
caves.
tuft geology or something like that.
And they in fact, it was the early Christians. They hid there from the Romans. They fled and they hid there, and they, in some cases, lived underground. As many as 20,000 people underground for months at a time. Really amazing place.
I want to see that.
But the tourism has just exploded in that area in a relatively short period of time. And now it's kind of like it's an area that's been subsisting on agriculture for a long time and was pretty poor. And now they have all these hotels are being built and people creating these cave lodges and all kinds of things, and tour companies and hot air balloon rides and all this stuff. And they're kind of reeling from the impact of this because it's totally changing the culture. Young people are actually moving in to get these jobs. It's sort of the only thing that they could do. And they're trying to figure out how to deal. A lot of them don't speak any English, but they're also dealing with now a huge amount of Chinese tourists coming in. You know, so like on the one hand, it seems like there's all this economic opportunity for them. They're becoming sort of dependent on it, but it's really changing the way that they live. And some people are even getting priced out of being able to live in this area that's been a traditional part of their families for generations and generations.
And there's a true kind of trampling impact as well. I remember years ago reading an article about loving our parks to death, the national parks in the U.S., and how beaten up they're getting by having this many people unload each summer or, each main tourist season. And the same obviously happens with the big boats, the cruises that unload in small areas, and suddenly the city just drops off a boat. Incredible impact.
Yeah, and so here's my excuse for why I was there, right? Like, my father moved to Israel a few years ago, and he really wanted us to come see him, his grandkids to come to Israel. And my wife and I decided, this will be the only chance that they'll have in their life to go,
right.
And so if we're going to take this trip, we're going to make the most of it. So we decided we would also go to Turkey when we're over there. And it's a tough thing. I mean, it's like, in some ways, we're doing sort of this last chance tourism or last chance travel.
Yes.
It wasn't, in that case, I was going to go to these places that might be gone because of climate change. But there are a lot of people doing that. There's actually kind of a budding new industry of people going to places like the Great Barrier Reef, or
swim the reef before it bleaches out.
Or go see glaciers before they disappear, And so you're in a sense, you're in doing this because you're worried about climate change and you're aware of what's happening. You're basically hastening it by participating.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get in the Arctic sea ice and go polar bear back riding. That's a good tourist opportunity.
I remember being like an undergrad and having this conservation biologist, Dan Jansen, and he was in Costa Rica, and I got to see him give a talk to this community. This is called Monte Verde, and now it's a cloud forest preserve and all this, and it's become kind of famous. But it was a sleepy little place when I was there. Mm-hmm. And then I went back 20 years later, and Dan Jansen had predicted this and encouraged the adoption of this sort of ecotourism thing. Mm. And so it's led to, of course, all this potential preservation. But now the place is really amazing how many hotels there are and how many like jeeps and guided tours you can have and zip lining.
Costa Rica is really dependent on tourism.
It's really dependent. And then there's these stats coming about light pollution. So all these insects are dying. And so there's this conundrum of it, how conservation minded is all this stuff.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, this is a tough one, and you got to really go back to some systems thinking, because if you didn't have the conservation and the dollars that come in from the tourism, then the habitat itself could be lost, right? People might say, "Oh, I have no economic opportunity, therefore I'm going to do subsistence farming in this
make charcoal
rainforest. I'm going to just cut it down." Or so it's a I don't know. It's such a tricky issue. There's no way to say really, like, tease out what is the overall effect, or is the conservation having too big of unintended consequences, or is it actually protecting an area that would have otherwise been lost?
Yeah.
I think for the most part, people aren't even thinking about this at all, right? It's so easy just to get on a plane. They want to go see the world. It's so easy and relatively inexpensive to do it. There is starting to be backlash, you know, and you know, this whole concept of flight shaming. I think there is even now new words in some languages for this. You know, Greta Thunberg, the young Swedish climate activist, she came to the United States and she decided to take a sailboat across because she won't fly. And I think that, I mean, we probably all know people, I certainly know people who made a vow not to fly at all. So it's rare, but people have been doing it. But I think partly because of the example that she set, this is becoming kind of this sort of new concept, you know, and people are wrestling with flight shaming. And I think the industry is starting to feel that.
Oh, totally. I think, you know, the industry is reacting to flight shaming by doing what the standard practice, okay? This is what you greenwash.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. So,
in fact, when we stop doing this podcast because nobody's listening to it anymore, that's what I'm going to go into.
Greenwashing.
I'm going to become a greenwashing consultant.
Yeah.
Oh, you'd be so good at it.
Yeah. I'm going to fly all around the world.
Yeah.
And consult with these businesses to tell them how to look like they are taking action without actually doing anything.
Well, I know I told you guys, and we aired it season 1, my conversation with the Alaska Airlines sustainability chief.
Oh, yeah.
Remember so she was telling me that she's working to, you know, make Alaska Airlines. I keep talking about Alaska Airlines more sustainable.
Their stock is going up right now.
Yeah.
So she was happy because they had just gotten rid of styrofoam coffee cups on their flights.
Problem solved.
Right. Well, it's a trouble because I was looking at these stats. So there's 4 billion passengers a year fly. Okay, that's 11 million people a day.
Holy man.
And that's 3% of greenhouse gas emissions. All right. And in every given moment of time, there's about 10,000 planes in the air, commercial planes.
10,000.
Yeah. But what's amazing?
You say that's 3% of greenhouse gas emissions, but do you know that international air travel is not accounted for at all in any of the national greenhouse gas inventories?
So like, very convenient.
No country actually claims that.
It's not mine. Not
Exactly.
mine. Not mine. I don't. I didn't do it.
Right. No. But the airlines are sensitive to this, and part of the reason is because only 20% of people alive today have ever stepped on an airplane. But if you look at sort of the projections for growth we're talking about of doubling in the next 20 years, of course, a lot of people, a lot of you know, Chinese consumers, people from India, a lot of South Asian, they're expected to start getting on planes in more, you know, massive numbers.
And but it's interesting. You said 4 billion a year, right?
Yeah. So
and you say only 20% have ever been on a plane. Yes. So what that is actually saying is that there are less than half of the people on the planet are flying a lot.
Yes,
right?
A lot.
And I bet it's just like economic inequality. There's the top 1% that are probably flying constantly.
Yes,
you know, all
million
the time.
miles a year kind of thing.
It's crazy for work. I used to have a boss when I worked at the U.S. Geological Survey, and she flew a lot for meetings, and I remember her saying she was part of the Million Mile Club. So right. You know, she could basically get a free ticket for her private travel anywhere she wanted to go because she had over a million miles.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what's a million miles. Like when I go out for a bike ride, if I go 10 miles, I'm like, wow, that was far.
Right. You can't. That's the thing. You cannot travel these distances with any other technology. Right. It's just amazing. Now, let me get into the greenwashing detail because it tells us a lot about what the structural physics involved in planes and how they're kind of screwed going forward. So there's three primary greenwashing tools they've got. They can tout efficiency improvements, they can talk about carbon offsets, and they can promote biofuels. And it all sort of doesn't really add up. So regarding efficiency, if you think about plane travel like 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, when your knees used to actually fit in the seat?
Yes. When you didn't have to pay for every ounce you took on.
Oh, yeah. Like on a Legion Air, you have to pay if you want to breathe.
Right, exactly.
Do you want air on this trip, sir?
Sure. Well, the coin-operated toilets have been really pissing people off.
Bitcoin operated toilets.
Yeah.
On the,
and when
on
the internet
flights.
connection goes down, oh man, you're just holding it.
You got to hold it for the whole flight.
Yeah.
Well, they're just putting carbon inserts in the seats, so they don't want you to get up
in case you have a Shart.
So they're gonna have little stadium pal bags that you can just strap on, with a catheter. You don't have to get up from your seat.
All right, let's stop this. Let's move on. Move on. Okay, we're gonna get in trouble. But okay, there's a great term that there's an international civil aviation organization, part of the United Nations, and it's got this statement of intention to achieve. I love this: carbon neutral growth.
Carbon neutral growth for air travel.
Yes, starting in 2021 with 2020 as the baseline. So
the first step is to take these magic beans.
Right? Yeah. So what they're going to do though is they realize that airlines are never going to have carbon emission growth, but through the trading of emissions units.
Right.
And declines of CO2 emissions in other sectors.
Right.
So it's like, you go first, you do it. I don't think
you cut all your emissions over there so we can keep doing what we're doing. We'll pay you.
Exactly.
Well, not keep doing what we're doing.
We're going to grow.
We're
going to grow.
Yeah. Right. And then the other one was, of course, the biofuels. And so I love this. There's this press release about the airline industry was excited about this nicotine-free energy tobacco strain that they grew in South Africa, and they harvest the plants, they refine the biofuel, they blend it into conventional fuel, and several flights in 2016 used it.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so demonstrating the potential of biofuels.
And if we allow smoking on planes again, if the plane starts running out of fuel, there's all that extra from the cigarettes.
Right.
You just put it right in the tank.
Exactly. But what's crazy is like then there are these gushing press releases, and then like, yes, biofuel production is 1 billion gallons a year now globally, and it's like, oh, that's 1% of airline use fuel.
Well, 1 billion sounds like a lot.
It
and then you realize,
like a lot.
Whoa, okay.
Right.
Well, so, nobody ever asked the question, if you start actually scaling that somehow, what's the energy return on energy invested? What happens to food if you're using all your land to grow, what is it, nicotine-free tobacco fuel?
Right. It's going to cut into the smoking industry. It's
too bad. That's too bad.
Yeah.
But you're talking about efficiency.
Yeah.
And I think we've all experienced what that efficiency looks like in the real world, right? They've been cramming us onto flights, making seats smaller, reducing the number of flights that they have. So they're basically overbooking flights constantly. They are charging for every little incidental thing. Any additional weight, you got to pay extra for.
Yeah, I like the way they try to hide the costs too. Like say, buy a ticket for $100, and then the next thing you know, double that.
The common thing now is you buy a ticket, but you don't actually get a seat assignment. You have to pay extra to get a seat assignment.
Right. What happens if you don't pay? Do they give you standing room only?
You got to just lay in the aisle.
We're gonna strap you to the wing, sir. Step this way.
But a lot of that is. I don't think it's so much greenwashing as it is the impact of fuel costs for the airline industry. When oil prices went up back in 2008, they peaked then. You're seeing huge amount of shockwaves in the airline industry because that's such a tremendous part of their costs.
Yes.
And they're so vulnerable to it. So they've been trying to deal with a lot of implementing efficiency gains to try to reduce that cost or pass on that cost as much as possible, but they're still really, really vulnerable to it.
But once you've squeezed all your efficiency out, you don't have any now resilience. It's sort of this conundrum where getting more efficient actually means you don't have margin for shocks. It's this irony of efficiency.
Right. Yeah.
So when prices go up again, how are they going to cope? There's no more efficiency to gain.
What strikes me is that it's all about the cheap supply of energy. That's how you can have this extreme travel, right? It's just hearkening again back to some of the just basic ideas that we've covered is you have to have this highly dense energy, readily available, relatively cheap, and then we can set up life based on that.
Yeah,
right?
we set up this whole infrastructure. The world is we're kind of dependent on it. We're talking about many countries being dependent on tourism, or areas, regions being dependent on tourism. I think we're all, in a sense, dependent on air travel and the ability of goods to be,
the way they say, the very wealthy in the world are, which a lot of the U.S. people are, right? So, and Europeans. So we should then only 20% have gone on a plane.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. So the three of us, and probably many of the people listening to this podcast, and you think about it, back to something else we talked about in season 1, we talked about Marvin Harris's cultural materialism. Yeah. So the theory there is that our structures and superstructures in society, that is like our political systems, how we make decisions together, our belief systems, all those things, are actually determined by infrastructure. And by infrastructure, he was actually meaning the physical world, right? The resources we use, not just like bridges and stuff we built, but the entire physical infrastructure of the world around us. And we tend to think normally like, oh, we create the world around us based upon our values and the systems we have. In his theory is actually the other way around. Yeah. So the fact that we had this incredible bounty of cheap fossil fuels, which is the only way, let's be honest, that you can get on a plane. They're talking about trying to do solar power planes with batteries, and if you understand the physics of it, you realize like, maybe you could do that for a very small light plane carrying
an Olympic athlete,
a small number of people, a small distance, short distance.
You ever you ever go to like an aviation museum and see one of the like pedal powered planes, or it's like they got the wingspan is huge and it's made out of cellophane, and
I mean they are working on this technology, but there are limits to it. You're not going to get on a 747 jumbo jet carrying batteries and get across the Atlantic, right?
No, so, you can go short distances relatively, maybe.
Yeah, and I don't even know if you could do that on a large plane carrying that many people,
Right.
But so it's completely built around access to this magical energy. But now, not only does tourism depend on it, a lot of business travel depend on it. We've kind of built our culture around it in the sense that our families are far flung, and we're constantly in a situation. I find myself in this situation all the time where, like I mentioned, I flew all the way to Israel with my kids so that they could see where their grandfather lives. How do you say no to that?
It's a catch-22, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the social pull to do that, especially with family. If you think about holiday times, I mean, it's considered, you're supposed to get together. Yeah. You're supposed to go, typically I think in our generation, it's like go back to the family home, wherever that was. Right. And now you might live, like in my case, 3,000 miles away from where that is.
Yeah. We had this, again, those of us with the privilege of having the opportunity to do this, had a lot of freedom to decide, I want to live over on the other side of the country.
Oh, yeah. I remember I went to graduate school in St. Louis, and my wife was in medical school in Vermont, and of course my family's from California, and it was just like, I can get a good flight to see y'all, a weekend at a time. And today it's even more extreme, where students and their families fly all over the country to, we're going to school different places. I'm kind of at the age now where I'm seeing this happen at undergrad level, right? And what are you going to do if your kid gets into some like nice East Coast school and they're from the West Coast and they want to experience another part of the country? And but what are you going to do? Tell them no because I flying?
And here we are. So we were talking about flight shaming and recognizing the climate impacts of air travel, these other negative impacts. But even if we discarded those concerns, we ignored those, the fact that the airline industry, air travel, is completely dependent on this depleting non-renewable resource, oil, that is becoming harder and harder to extract and more expensive to extract. We're going to have to figure out how to do things differently. And we have no real alternatives, no matter what people are telling us about biofuels or solar power planes or
Hyperloops. I know that's a favorite of yours.
Right, Hyperloops.
Yeah.
Transporter beams. The magic beans are starting to look better and better.
Beans are looking great.
And I kind of think that this is this extreme travel, the going around the other side of the globe, the other side of the country, it is just an extension, really, of the extreme travel that's in our daily lives, where we go marathon level distances each day. Most people, we don't break a sweat,
right?
And so it reminds me of the car culture episode from season 1.
Another thing that I know it's not politically expedient to talk about sacrifice. That you get in trouble that way, but I do think, we'll lose something as we lose the easy, cheap fuel, right? I mean, it's, like you said, a freedom of mobility. I could choose to live in Oregon rather than staying my whole life in Georgia, where I was born. And that's a privilege. It used to be if somebody had wanted to do that, even just a couple hundred years ago, the difficulties of making that choice. So, you would basically be totally stripped away from everything you knew.
Does anyone have family stories like that? Like go back to their grandparents or great grandparents? I do. I have a great grandmother from Italy, and she and her family, part of her family from southern Italy, took a boat all the way to New York. And she was so seasick that she basically says, I am never getting on another boat again. We are now going to live in in America. And
wait, this was supposed to be a tourist trip?
Well, they weren't sure. They weren't sure. They were business owners in Italy, and they weren't committed. But essentially,
so they hadn't packed up everything.
Well, they
once you vomit 4,000 times, now you're committed.
Yeah, but that kind of sealed the deal for we're never going back.
Yeah, I mean, my family, my father's family, all came from Eastern Europe, and they never went back.
Yeah, it was just too expensive and inconvenient.
Yeah, I mean, my great grandmother, she went by boat. And then she actually went by another boat down and basically around South America.
Whoa.
To go up to get basically to California.
And that was a rowboat, too. She was sitting there with the oars. And
you should have seen her arms, man. She had guns. Yeah, it was incredible. They didn't show up well in those black and white photos, but they were there.
Right.
Yeah, it's incredible how much privilege we have to be able to circulate the world and go where we want.
And I think the key thing, maybe to take away is to recognize the novelty of that and in our vulnerability to that going away, and maybe make some, give some thought to the choices that we're making. One is that trip necessary? And two, really think about where you're going to plant roots, and where your family is, and really have a long, I think all of us need to be having a long, hard conversation with ourselves about where we should be in terms of climate changes.
Yeah.
But also be thinking about it in terms of, hey, if you couldn't get on a plane all the time tomorrow, where would you want to be? And where's your family? Where are the people that you love?
Right.
And start having some of those conversations about where you want to replant roots.
Yeah, and then maybe just start taking some simple steps too, right? To just I like that, to think about it and to have a conversation about what you would do, but then just start making your life as congruent with what you come up with in those conversations.
Yeah.
But before you do, just do one last trip to Disney World.
It's the best.
It's the best.
Yeah. Especially if you have your niece is playing in a sports competition there.
Right. Or Ski Dubai.
Hell yeah, Ski Dubai. My wife's second cousin's stepdaughter is in the curling junior Olympics there this year.
Hey, to get more information or to stay updated whenever we put out a new episode, go to postkarma.org/crazytown and make sure you sign up for our email list.
Visitors to our website this time, you're going to get something good. You're going to get a carton of cigarettes with nicotine-free tobacco because they couldn't use it all for the biofuel in the greenwash.
Yeah, not only that, but you're going to get a free baggage voucher for any airlines and unlimited bathroom pass.
Wow. Can you get oxygen too?
Yeah, I was going to say we'll throw in an oxygen tank. So you don't have to pay extra for that on some of those airlines.
Sweet. Yeah. We're also offering a free leg amputation so that you can fit in the seat and actually have a comfortable flight when you're headed to Disney World or Ski Dubai.
Well, Those are two difficult destinations to go to without legs. So we might have to think. Might have to think about.
You're
going
to be too short for.
Okay, we're also going to give you hand skis for Dubai.
That's right, and we'll teach you how to do handstands.
All this can be yours for going to postcarbon.org/crazytown.